Welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Samar. On today's program, we're going to be speaking about the latest crackdown on student protesters, whether they're on visas or are permanent residents. People like Mahmoud Khalil, the update on that case. Also, this week, Israel has restarted their ongoing genocide in Gaza by launching attacks, airstrikes on Gaza. And now some 700 people have been killed in the last 48 hours. We'll also have a special guest that will be joining us. If we have time, we'll be speaking, taking your phone calls, but mainly talking about what's happening in Israel and people that are protesting the genocide here in the United States. That and more. This is True Talk on WMNF. We'll be right back.
For everything in life, there are three C's. For everything in life, there are three C's.
Welcome back to True Talk, and this is myself, Ahmed Bedier, and my co-host Samar Jarrah. Samar, Ramadan is now 2/3 over. There's only 10 days left. We're now on the 20th day. So how is your Ramadan going?
Alhamdulillah, Ramadan is going very well. For some reason, I don't get hungry, Ahmed, or thirsty. But the day is very long. The hours are long. However, whenever I am hungry, Ahmed, and whenever I am, thinking what I'm cooking. So today it just crossed my mind, why do I not just make lentil soup and some chicken and rice? People in Gaza are fasting, and instead of thinking of what they can eat, last night during suhoor, which is just the last meal we have before sunrise, they were bombed. And they are living in tents, and the images that are coming out of there, Ahmed, is just unbelievable that it is happening. I mean, I don't understand, why is it so simple to kill 700 people in 48 hours in front of cameras, and then for people to be doubting, for instance, that the Holocaust can actually happen. People can be killed on a daily basis, hourly basis, and the world will be silent. So yes, it is very simple and very easy to kill scores of people with a silent conscience of the world. So I'm not enjoying my Ramadan. Not
right.
When I am.
We're now. I mean, there's been since the beginning of Ramadan. There was this. For almost 2 months, there's been a relative. I mean, there were a lot of attacks, but nothing like, there was a ceasefire in place, fragile, but still was there. People were trying to return to normality, and they started celebrating Ramadan and participating, and then without warning. And this is the cruelty, without any warning. And what has now come out is that Israel had been planning this for weeks to carry out a surprise attack. And as you said, because during Ramadan, there is this tradition to have a pre-dawn meal in the early hours in the morning around, 3 or 4 a.m. And it's a meal called suhoor, where families are gathering to have a small meal before they start fasting. And the Israelis know this, and they pick that time to have maximum impact. Of course, the children are not fasting, so they're sleeping. So while the parents are gathering and the adults are gathering for this meal, children are sleeping. Something like, I forgot the exact number, maybe you can tell me, but a couple of hundred children were killed as they slept. 318. This is criminal. There should be outrage in the world. The world body, and of course there were condemnations from different countries. The only one that justified it or said anything in support of it is the United States at the United Nations. It's such a shame that in this day and age, with the world media that exists, and 24-hour news cycles and smartphones and social media, and people are seeing things live, and they're seeing the dead bodies, they're seeing the torn up children, and people are not able to stop it because Israel has the backing of this administration. And it's not just this administration, it also had the backing of the previous administration. But during the Holocaust, it was hidden. They were hiding it. They were going out of their way to hide what they were, the criminality, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, the Holocaust that the Nazis were carrying out. They were trying to cover it up and they were hiding it. This is in your face. This is happening. It's blatant. They are declaring their genocidal intent, and they're carrying it out while the world watches. And, at the same time, senators from our government are visiting while this genocide is continuing, like John Fetterman, who claims to be a Democrat, and he was there, and I'm sure you saw this image of him meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who handed him a gift, a silver-plated beeper, basically pager, the beeper thing, that similar to the ones that they use to detonate all these people in Lebanon that are supposed to be associated with Hezbollah. And they killed they injured, some were killed, injured many people, including children and other bystanders that had nothing to do with it. And now it's basically like a trophy item and a gift that they give other people. And people are happy to receive this pager, which is a symbol of, a criminal activity that's not sanctioned by international law. So it's really sad to see. And then you see the reaction in the Middle East, people in the Middle East and in the Muslim world, to see all of this carnage being carried out by Israel with the backing of the United States. I don't know. It's really disheartening.
There is only, I am following demonstrations happening in Morocco, of all places, but almost non-existent in the Arab world. There was some, Ahmed, near the Israeli embassy in Jordan, but
why is that?
Because they live under authoritarian systems where they disappear people and they arrest them once they go to the streets. So there has been a very systematic, I believe, destruction of humans in the Arab world, their willpower. Like, I have so many friends, Ahmed, who live in Cairo and in Jordan, and they are angry, frustrated. They donate money to those who were able to get out of Gaza and are located or being treated in Egypt or in Jordan. But this is the most they can do, and they do it secretly because they are afraid of the authorities. They are afraid of being arrested, because they did arrest a lot of people and are in jail and in prison. And these are authoritarian regimes that cater to the West and not to their own people.
And they're defending Israel. In a way, they're trying to stop their own population, to try to not allow these protests. You'll find people within Israel itself that are protesting their own government, going back and launching these airstrikes for different reasons. One, they don't want common sense. They don't want the hostages to be killed from the bombings of their own country. But meanwhile, like you said, in all these Arab nations that surround Israel, their leadership is cracking down, does not allow these protests, which defies the accusation that somehow Israel is surrounded by all these enemies. None of Israel's surrounding countries are actually launching attacks against Israel.
No, especially the neighboring ones.
Right, and the only ones are the Houthis in Yemen. No one else is attacking Israel a constant lie that we hear in Washington, D.C., that somehow Israel's under constant threat and they have to, kill all these people. Meanwhile, Israel is bombing everybody around them, including Syria, including Iran, in Lebanon, of course, in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Yemen. And, not to mention that the United States started carrying out airstrikes against Yemen, one of the poorest countries in the world, all because of Israel. It's really sad. One thing that we're going to talk about also is the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who is the Columbia University graduate student who was, arrested and detained, abducted without notice, and just simply telling him that his visa was revoked when in reality he had a green card. It just shows you that even the people that are doing these arrests, they don't really know what the situation is or the status. And when they were told by his wife that, well, he's a permanent resident, he has a green card, and he said, well, that's revoked too. And now he's still in Louisiana, and his lawyers are hoping that he is extradited or brought back to New York. But a judge recently ruled that he should be sent to New Jersey, back to New Jersey, where he can have his court case there to justify, to look into if his deportation is justified or not. But overnight, another student was also abducted on his way home. This one is a doctorate student pursuing a PhD at Georgetown University, and he's also a professor. And after teaching a class, he was returning home, I think it was Monday, and right before he got home, men with masks on approached him, caught him, and informed him, your work visa or J1 visa has been revoked and you're no longer allowed to stay in the country. And again, this man is married to an American citizen, and it seems like what both of those cases have in common is the source of the accusations has been these pro-Israel Zionist hardcore Zionist groups that are just launching social media attacks and smears against these students, and then somehow the government is going off that and going out and arresting these people. Have you seen that?
Yes, of course, Ahmed. And I'm very pleased to announce that we have an expert and an investigative journalist to tell us about, like you just mentioned, Ahmed, who is volunteering these names. And there must be a name bank or some people who are trying to promote this crackdown on free speech on U.S. campuses. So we have with us Ellie Clifton. He's an investigative journalist. He writes about a lot of interesting topics, but what attracted me was the latest, which is titled "The Israeli-American Trump Mega Donor Behind Speech Crackdown." And I hope Ellie will be telling us about this particular group that was formed in 2015. Let me welcome Ellie. Good to have you, Ellie, on our True Talk show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Ellie. A very interesting article that you wrote. I know you're going to be talking about Miriam Adelson in particular. I have been seeing her at the White House and next to Trump. But who is this lady, and what is it that she formed with her husband in 2015 that we can trace into what is going on U.S. campuses these days?
Well, that's right. So Miriam Adelson and her husband, Sheldon Adelson, who died in 2021, are and have been the largest donors to the Republican Party, really since for the past, 15 years or so. And the two of them have contributed in excess of $600 million, largely to Republican presidential, congressional, and gubernatorial races. And the two of them, now just Miriam, have never really concealed. They've been pretty upfront about the fact that their first and foremost interest in engaging in American politics is promoting Israel and U.S. support for Israel, what is many of us would see as largely sort of unconditional U.S. support for Israel. They fought hard against, for instance, the Iran nuclear deal, and they've been major backers of politicians who have been very much proponents of the war in Gaza from the U.S. end. Now, what they formed in 2015 was, and they give to a lot of different groups and to politicians. And what they formed, they just put in a little over $2 million in 2015, was a group called the Maccabee Task Force, which claims to combat the disturbing spread of anti-Semitism on college campuses, end quote. That's what they describe it as. But in practice, and again, they're very open about this. What that really means is that they go after the boycott, defest, and sanctions campaign against Israel, which the group characterizes as an anti-Semitic movement that crosses the line from legitimate criticism of Israel into the dangerous demonization of Israel and its supporters. Now, flash forward, obviously the war in Gaza really, really, really set off a lot of public concern and upset about the role that the U.S. plays and the ways that the United States is complicit in what certainly the ICC says are grounds for a case that there's a genocide going on in Gaza being committed by the Israelis. And as those a lot of those most outspoken people and a lot of the most obvious opposition to U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza occurred on American college campuses, where you had protests across the country, and certainly one of the most high-profile places that was going on was at Columbia University. Now, the Adelson support for this on-campus or organization that focuses on college campuses and on Israel on college campuses really, really picked up a lot over the years from 2015 with that initial seed contribution of a little over $2 million, and between the time that the organization was founded and 2023, which is the last time we have tax filings from them, it showed they had put nearly $70 million into the group. And the group, I looked very closely at a lot of their social media activity in the past few months, and they really ramped up their since really the Trump administration came in. They really ramped up a lot of their calls for federal attention to what they described as anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, which, as soon as you looked a little more closely at what they were talking about, that these were nearly always pro-Palestinian protests or protests calling on the university to divest from investments for their endowments in Israel, or for an end to U.S. Military support for Israel. And what I found particularly interesting is that they, as soon as Khalil was arrested, Mahmoud Khalil, they came out with various accusations, claiming that he was, putting out pro-Hamas propaganda, that he was engaged in, that he was, quote, wreaking havoc at Columbia, that he came to the U.S. to promote chaos and destruction. Pretty bold claims. And when I reached out to them to say, well, these are pretty strong claims, what is your support for the claim, for instance, that Khalil was a, quote, Hamas supporter, which is awfully close to a material support for terrorism claim, something he was not charged with. They were unable to, or they declined to provide any evidence. And so finally, and I'm sure, and I'm going on here for a while, and I want to get your thoughts and questions as well. But the thing that really finally drew me to this as something that I thought needed attention is the fact that it's not just that Miriam Adelson, this Israeli-American billionaire, is a donor, or the largest donor to the group. There's something else here which is not anywhere disclosed on their website, but I did find in tax filings from the group, which is that she's actually the head of it. She's the president of the group. So what you have is what I perceive as potentially a pretty dangerous situation of the largest donor to the Republican Party, the largest donor to Trump's entire political career, outstripping Elon Musk. Elon Musk gave the most to Trump's presidential campaign efforts in the past cycle, but when you put them all together, Miriam Adelson has given, and Sheldon Adelson have given more. And you have the largest donor to Trump's political career, leading a campaign, directing it against, in this case, an individual, a graduate student, trying to get their green card revoked for engaging in what most of us would see as First Amendment protected speech. And that's pretty scary.
So, Ellie, you are trying to say that she being president means that she has hands-on on this group and what they do, and they do volunteer these names, and then she can pull the strings with the White House and pull the strings with different branches of government.
She would certainly be well positioned to do so. Again, they won't answer questions about whether they've had any contact with the White House. What we do know is that Trump has complained in the past about how active the Adelsons are in trying to get what they want, that he has boasted about what he has given them in the past, including moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And to make sure that the embassy couldn't be moved back, he sold the ambassador's house in Tel Aviv to the Adelson family. So nobody is concealing that either from Trump's end or from the Adelson side that they are very active as donors and that they expect something in return for that. So these are people who have openly sought influence with their money with the candidates who they support.
I want to go back to something you mentioned in the article, and I urge our listeners to go Google it, the Israeli-American Trump mega donor behind the speech crackdown on campuses. I want to ask about the mechanism they use. Do they have like accounts on Twitter, on social media, on Facebook? You do mention Facebook in particular, and I want you to elaborate on it because I think from your investigation, you found out that there are members who live outside the U.S. and might be contributing to all this hysteria going on.
So they have accounts on all the various social media platforms. And honestly, on most of them, they have a pretty modest following. However, on Facebook, they have an enormous following, over 300,000 followers. It's clearly the platform where they have found the greatest success and where they have the greatest influence. And Facebook has a functionality that lets you, it's called their page transparency function, that lets you look at who is managing these pages. And when I went into that for the Maccabee Task Force, the name of the group's information, it said that 2 of the 7 managers of this page that has over 300,000 followers were based in Israel, which again raises questions about, so is this an American group that is concerned about college campuses, or is this actually being orchestrated, at least partially, from a country 6,000 miles away, which kind of just hits home that what this appears to be is a crackdown on criticism of the U.S. support for a foreign country, Israel in this case. And part of that campaign, I guess unsurprisingly, is certainly being managed from that foreign country, Israel.
If you're just joining us, this is True Talk on WMNF. Samar and I are speaking to, is it Ellie or Eli?
Eli.
Eli Clifton. He's an investigative journalist with the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and he wrote a recent article about these deportations or attempted deportations of college students that were participating in protesting the genocide being carried out in Gaza. And the title of the article is The Israeli-American Trump Mega Donor Behind Speech Crackdowns. Eli, when I look at Twitter and other social media attacks on Mahmoud Khalil and others, it seems like this task force that was started and funded by the Adelsons in 2015, which is called the Maccabee Task Force, is not the only one, but it seems like there's a kind of a network of interconnected or echo chamber of these accounts that kind of repeat the same talking points over and over. So are they, is it like, for example, like Middle East Forum and this Bedier and others, are they basically coordinating together? Is Adelson also funding this network? Or are they, because they just seem to repeat these talking points where it seems like when you read it that, there's overwhelming evidence.
Yeah, it certainly appears to be coordinated. I think it's important when you look at this network to understand that while I think you mentioned Middle East Forum and Maccabee Task Force, and I guess I should say credit to them, are fairly transparent about who they are, who's behind it. That these are legitimate organizations that are registered inside the United States and have a staff, many of whom are listed on the websites. There are a lot more groups, such as like Canary Mission or Beitar, which is also fairly opaque about who's behind it, that go out of their way in cases like Canary Mission, and there's a lot of other ones like that, to conceal where they're based, who's behind them. There's not like a human being that you can identify as being involved with it, and that they are targeting individuals while not revealing anything about who they are. And I think that those are groups that you're asking the right questions, and we don't have answers to that. And that's really problematic, because what we've seen with Maccabee Task Force is that this is a group that's at least partially being managed and run from Israel. The president of it and the largest donor is Israeli American, and very closely aligned with the Israeli far right. And so we can actually start to see that, well, this is an interesting example of what we could characterize as being the cost of the U.S. support of Israel, not just making us complicit in what Israel does to civilians in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Lebanon, but this is also starting to impose a cost on us in terms of the people, both Israel and the United States, who are really trying to make this maintain the status quo of U.S. support for Israel, are starting to impose a real cost on all of us. This is starting to encroach on Americans' civil liberties. This is starting to encroach on our First Amendment protections, protections that we understand to apply to a permanent resident like Mahmoud Khalil. And that's really scary, because it's starting to show that, I wouldn't go so far as to say that war is coming home to us, but it is starting to impose costs on us. It is starting to impose costs on our society. It's starting to impose costs on our own ability to dissent about the policies that our government has in ways that we have not seen recently. And the fact that it's being done by groups, some of which you mentioned, that make an effort to conceal who are behind them, is even more concerning and disturbing, I would say.
The anti-Muslim hardline or an anti-Palestine Zionist network in America has been around for a while. And I'm not talking even about the ADL, who's becoming more and more extreme in that sense. I'm talking about Daniel Pipes and the Frank Gaffneys and post 9/11 hardcore hardline Zionists, where they don't recognize Palestinian existence and things. They've been inching towards mainstream. In the past, they've been on the fringe, even within Jewish society or Jewish American life. They were kind of on the fringe with their craziness and their Islamophobia and xenophobia and going after Muslims. But it seems now they're in the mainstream. But when I look at things like Beitar and the extreme things they're saying, which seems like they're a Kahanist type ideology, which is actually a group that's designated as a terrorist organization, and they're even banned at some point in Israel itself, that Beitar kind of aligns themselves with that type of violence. In fact, in some of their things online, they're threatening other Jews in America. And they're even threatening law enforcement, saying, if you don't take action, remember, Jews fight back. It seems like they're using very threatening and hostile language. How is it that it's almost like, they're accusing people like Mahmoud Khalil of being a threat, but the type of rhetoric they're using is definitely threatening and kind of insightful. How are they able to get away with that stuff?
I think part of it is that the events on the ground have, for lack of a better term, sort of caught up to these sorts of groups, right? That at this point, the United States has been, a party to and complicit in an Israeli war in Gaza that has it cost tens of thousands, if not 100,000, Palestinian civilian lives, and defending that essentially requires a degree of dehumanization, not just of Palestinians or civilians in Gaza, but as this drags on and as public opinion is shifting against this war, as we have seen, it's been a consistent decline of support for Israel's war in Gaza, certainly in the United States. And it's vastly unpopular in Europe and in most parts of the world, that the efforts to stifle opposition, the efforts to delegitimize the opposition, the efforts to dehumanize the opponents of the war have become more and more extreme, and frankly more and more necessary if you're going to try to shut down the discourse in our public spaces, including at American college campuses, where the most vocal opposition has emerged. So I think that there's a degree of, as the time goes on, as this war continues, as people see more and more photos and videos of what could only be described as atrocities against civilians, the efforts, the methods required to curtail that it is going to require greater and greater, efforts to stifle opposition. And I think what we're seeing here is, that, Maccabee Task Force is claiming now that Khalil, they said, quote, came to the U.S. to promote chaos and destruction. I mean, they're basically having to call him a terrorist. Mm-hmm. The only problem is that the administration and the Justice Department have not brought charges against him that actually match up to those claims. So there still is a bit of a disconnect here between what these advocacy groups would like to characterize pro-Palestinian protesters as versus what the Justice Department is prepared to label them as and to actually prosecute. I don't know if that gap is going to continue. I don't know if they're going to try to bring more serious charges against some of these student leaders and student protesters. But I do think it's a scary message that these groups are saying, given their proximity, especially in the case of Maccabee Task Force, to the president.
In the past, when speaking about these groups that used to be seen as the fringe, when they made these accusations against Muslim Americans or Palestinian Americans, law enforcement didn't act on it because it was just hate rhetoric or whatever. And by the way, some of these groups are recognized as hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center and others, that they're legit hate and, anti-Muslim groups. So they used to be dismissed. Why is it now that somehow it seems like DHS and some different agencies are taking their cues from these, Zionist organizations that have it in or out for Palestinian Americans or Muslim Americans or even just Americans in general that speak out against, Gaza without necessarily going through the investigative process? Because I've seen where some people on television are actually defending some of these actions, saying, well, Mahmoud Khalil, he's aligned with Hamas. And then when they're pushed to defend their position, like, what is your proof? And they say, it's all over the place. Haven't you seen it? And when they're pushed further, no, we don't see it. Is it because of their speech? No, it's not. It's because of their activity. And then they point to things like just guilt by association, and just keeps it really vague. So how is it that these groups that were on the outside, that somehow that the government seems to be taking some elements, not all of it, obviously, because like you said, they weren't charged by the Department of Justice, but some elements of the government are, following their rhetoric?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two broader trends here. One is one I already mentioned, which is that, the war is deeply unpopular, but it's been supported by both Democrats and Republicans. So I think that this slow slide towards having to demonize, often through really disingenuous means, the people who are leading protests, is something that, while it would be nice to say only one party is engaged in this, and listen, it's obviously gotten worse under the Trump administration with these attempts to deport student protesters, but the crackdown, the vitriol pointed towards American college campuses, and the perception that they are somehow out of control because of protests expressing frustration and anger at civilian deaths in Gaza, is something that Republicans and Democrats have certainly thrown fuel on the fire for. So I think that this was a process that got us to this point, that I wouldn't just point to one political party. But, I would also say in the case of someone like Miriam Adelson, and there are people on the Democratic side, such as Haim Saban, who also are sort of enforcers when it comes to making sure that American politicians have no daylight between their own positions and that of Israel. I think that these individual donors, have gained far more influence and sway in the political process on both sides of the aisle than they would in the past. And I say that because I think Citizens United sort of uncorked these unlimited campaign contributions that these billionaires could make. And what that permits those donors to have is a greater degree of say, a greater degree of influence than they would in the past. And very often, their goals and what they are advocating for differs from what the constituents of in either political party actually want. Again, this war is quite unpopular in the Democratic Party, becoming less popular in the Republican Party. It's by no means popularly supported by any meaningful measure in either political party right now in the United States. So I think it requires these more extreme measures, and it creates space for what you described as sort of these anti-Muslim, in some case sort of conspiracy theory, like Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy or David Horowitz's Freedom Center, the American Congress for Truth. We can go through the list of these extremist conspiracy groups and the wild and crazy things they've said. But they are having a moment now where politicians who want to continue the American flow of weapons and aid for Israel need more and more extreme reasons to shut down the criticism and to justify ongoing American complicitness in this war. And that's where groups like this, have something to offer.
But we have constitutional rights. That's what sets America different than other places. You can't just pick up people and just to silence them. It's now sending this chilling, effect on the rest of the country, where people are afraid to speak. Even that's a different topic. Some judges are afraid to speak because, there's this kind of digital lynch mob that exists, that, anything that goes against what the party currently wants, and that's in charge, that, you could be next. Are these online hooligans are going to start targeting someone else and just start smearing them, repeating false accusations on this platform on Twitter, and then somehow they'll get like a boost from or a retweet from Elon Musk, and then all hell breaks loose. And then if you're somebody like Mahmoud Khalil, you're just a college student, you don't have those type of resources. Why are they coming so hard on these individuals like him? And then last night when it came out, this Georgetown student, PhD candidate, Batar Sodar, or his name is, I don't have his exact name, but he's also abducted and taken to Louisiana. Why are they all coming down on these individuals? Even the president retweeting about it, and the Secretary of State, and the most powerful people in the world.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is that it's really not about these individuals. It's really, listen, I don't think U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza is seriously threatened by Mahmoud Khalil, by one individual. As effective as he might be as a student leader at Columbia University, he is clearly, simply one person who holds the same view and says the same thing as a lot of certainly college students and as a lot of Americans. But I do think that the message they are trying to send is to stifle speech, to end the visible dissent towards American complicitness in the war in Gaza. And they have to make examples out of some people. And I think they wanted some high profile people. I think they wanted people who they thought they could deport. And in many ways, sort of the cruelty is the point, right? That by showing how far the government is prepared to go to shield Israel from criticism, they think that the administration clearly thinks that will be effective. And I think it probably will be effective to some degree. And that's why civil liberties are so important, is to prevent this type of thing from happening, and hopefully the courts will see that as well. That this is a very slippery slope that the Trump White House is clearly trying to push us onto, and were they to be successful in deporting a green card holder for purely for speech and not for providing any material support to a listed terrorist group, I think we would be in very serious trouble in terms of the future of allowing dissent, not just on college campuses, but anywhere in this country.
Yeah, that's very troubling indeed. Maybe I know you have to go, but it was good having you. Are you worried about yourself and writing an article about such a powerful woman?
No, it's the journalism that I do, and I have confidence that at the end of the day that our civil liberties and our First Amendment are going to be upheld. I've certainly written about Mary Adelson plenty in the past, and I hopefully it gives other people some calm that I've never felt that I was being personally targeted as a response to that, and I certainly hope it stays that way.
Okay, Samar.
No, I just wanted to tell Eli, don't worry, you will always have True Talk to be on and defend yourself and present the case. God forbid that this happens.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Eli Clifton, for being on True Talk. He's the author of a very wonderful piece called The Israeli-American Trump Mega Donor Behind Speech Crackdowns. Thank you so much, Eli, for being on True Talk.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Ahmed, I hope our listeners will be really reading the article. But yeah, your question was so interesting. And, for our listeners, they can't see him, but he's like, taken aback.
It was kind of a nervous laugh there. He's like,
Yeah, because, we're talking about people with millions, not only millions of dollars.
Billions.
Billions of dollars, but the fact that they are in direct contact with the immigration, with the FBI, with the White House. So, how can you fight that? For instance, there are people who are criticizing Mahmoud Khalil because he has something like 17 lawyers. Why would he have 17 lawyers? There are lawyers who are on the case who are in complete disagreement with the Palestinian cause and in complete disagreement with the politics of Mahmoud Khalil, but they favor the First Amendment. They want to make sure that civil liberties in America are not tampered with because, today it's us, maybe the Palestinians or the pro-Palestine people, but tomorrow it can be poor Democrats or whatever that is not hardcore Republican. You have Republican voters who are now going to town hall meetings and protesting these new policies of Elon Musk and Doge and all these plans to fire people. So now it can be against the very Republicans who voted for this administration to be in power. And that's why Mahmoud Khalil has volunteer lawyers. Not only lawyers that were hired, because he doesn't have the money even
exactly. He had one lawyer, immigration lawyer. I think her name was Amy.
Yeah, the one
that was on the phone when he was being abducted and stuff. But all these other ones are pro bono. They work for civil rights and civil liberties organizations, groups like the ACLU and others, because this is a constitutional case. It's about the right to free speech. The First Amendment, the right to free speech is like the bedrock of what it means to be an American. And
Yeah,
it seems like, they're just going after that. They're just saying, well, no, if the president or the administration says certain type of speech is not allowed, then that's a threat. You can't say that. That is un-American. And somehow people are forgetting something called due process. Okay, you keep accusing him of being somehow connected or aligned with Hamas. Well, prove it in court. Take him to court, show the evidence. No, they don't want to do that. They just want to make the accusation and say you're a threat being here. Oh, the fact that you're protesting, that's a threat. Or you're going against American foreign policy. People go against American foreign policy all the time. It doesn't mean they're anti-American. I mean, you and I are both American. We criticize the foreign policy. We are proud to be American. And the reason we care about America is we're criticizing things that are harmful in our eyes and our views about America, right?
Just like the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war. How many times when it wasn't popular, you and I said, this is not going to work. A lot of people are going to die on both sides. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And it didn't work. And what do we have now in Iraq and Afghanistan? We pulled out of there. And what you and I said, because, we see the world from two different perspectives. One foot is in the Arab world and Muslim world, and one foot is in America. So we have a better way of analyzing these things, but seems nobody listens to us. Ahmed, it's
some people, our listeners, are listening to us. The ones that are donating to our station, they see the value. But I thought it was funny when you asked me, you always have True Talk, and I was thinking, are we going to have True Talk? Because, they're also cracking down on public radio, on community radio. They took the funding away from, they're trying to take funding away from PBS and NPR and others. They just fired all these people from Voice of America, this a station that's been
Al-Hurra,
this has been kind of the better, well, it's been kind of pushing American, and some of them is seen as pushing American propaganda in these different parts of the world. But they're just simply just changing things so fast.
Yeah. For instance, Ahmed, I want to tell you about my one of our donors. Every couple of campaigns, she gives us $500 challenge.
To the station?
To the station, to True Talk.
Yeah.
She did not this past fund drive, the one before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to mention her name because I didn't ask her. So she's a volunteer with Meals on Wheels.
Oh.
Which is she goes 9 a.m. in the morning, picks 6-7 meals, and she gives them to old people, mainly Republican, because I live in a Republican town.
Okay.
And older people who paid into the system through their Social Security and work. So but they can't get outside the house for a disability or anything. She is beyond her wits, because they took the money for Meals on Wheels. It's not much, but it's now less meals. So instead of 4 or 5 meals a week, it's 3 meals. These people cannot cook. They cannot go out and buy. They don't know how to use InstaShop.
And that's how we're saving money, by punishing these people. One less meal. Why don't you cut the military budget?
Republican. Ahmed, these are hardcore Republican area.
Right. Well, I mean, they can't just cut it just for the Democrats.
Of course.
So they're going to cut it across the board. The vets,
exactly.
It's impacting everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where I want to go to what you just said, free speech. It's not going to be just for you and I and WMNF and Al-Hurra and Voice of America. It can be for anyone. Like these people, Meals on Wheels, or Habitat for Humanity, another thing that she volunteers for, and our mosque volunteers to build these homes. Their budget was cut. So free speech will eventually touch on other people's lives, not only those who are pro-Palestine.
Right, you're saying if those people start complaining, they may crack down on their speech as well.
And I want to mention something, Ahmed, interesting, because, my husband is a physician and he travels to attend conferences in America. And in particular, I think he went before several times to France. So there is this French scientist who's invited to attend an American science conference.
Mm-hmm.
So they detained him and they took his phone. And they saw that, I don't know how they understand French, that he had a critical post on Trump.
Oh, on Trump.
Nothing like threatening to kill him or anything. Just some like if they open my phone and they see me
Like
tweeting about
half of
Trump,
America is saying bad things about Trump.
they did not allow him in. I mean, people don't think like, the US makes billions of dollars from these medical conferences, trade conferences. I mean, I have friends who come from all over the Arab world to go to Vegas to attend food conferences and shows and stuff like that. So what is happening is borderline crazy, Ahmed. And I want to allude to the fact that CARE put an appeal, and I want you to talk about it because you know more about these things. Don't hand your phone. Don't answer questions. If you are entering this country, you have the right to have a lawyer before
Right.
you give. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's an uptick, obviously, in these things, but they were happening before as well. When you're crossing the border, coming back into the United States, border agents that can take you to secondary screenings. And even if you're an American citizen, they start asking, okay, can you show us your phone? Can you unlock the phone? We want to inspect your phone. And these lawyers are saying, you don't have to do that. You don't have to unlock it. You don't have to do those things. They may confiscate they may just hold you up. A lot of times they just keep holding you up. And especially if you have a connecting flight, it just becomes a burden and you want to just get it over with. So people end up just, giving their rights away and unlocking the phone. And then they sometimes take it in another room. They plug into stuff. They may download things. But if you don't do that, they may still take your phone away. So now they're saying, well, don't travel with your phone because they may confiscate it. But they may inspect things on there and then they either use it against you because somehow there's a viewpoint that your rights are somewhat suspended at the border, that they can, the right to, again, search and seizure without a warrant is somehow suspended for national security reasons. There is actually a court case that's going through the system now challenging that, and it may eventually get to the Supreme Court where they decide on this issue. Others are saying, well, there are so many people that are having a hard time getting back into the country, whether they're on green cards, like lawful permanent residents. These are people that were here, for decades. And then when they're returning into the United States, they're trying to get them to sign away to give up their residency, like, voluntarily give it up. And they pressure them to do so. And they're advising, do not sign anything at the border without a lawyer. So that's one advice that they were saying. And they were also saying that, so that's the other issue. They're even going as far as, some organizations are going as far as advising people not to travel outside the United States in the near future until they figure out what's going on with this new policies, because it's not necessarily a written policy or announced, but they're definitely seeing people being held up, turned away at the border, whether they're flying in. And some of these people are actually lawful permanent residents. So it is concerning. You should check with your immigration lawyer if you're in that situation. Some people, especially if they're Arab or Muslim, they're being asked about their political views. They're being asked about, what they think about the war that's happening in Gaza, which we actually recognize as a genocide. What if you're coming back through the border and then they ask the person, what do you think of what's happening in Gaza? And then you say, well, that's a genocide. It's illegal. I don't want my tax money funding it. And then right away, that's like a mark against you. This is your political right to free speech. You should normally be able to say these things, but now people are going to stay quiet or not express themselves. And that's really chilling. That's not what it means to be an American. Anyway, Samar, we're basically out of time. We're going to be here next week, same time, same place. Stay safe, Samar. And I know you're active on Twitter, but Twitter is becoming very vicious. It's like this mob situation. Every time you turn it on, you just see Elon Musk's posts, and then you see other posts that are, support Elon Musk. Now you just see, it's kind of weird. You see all these posts where people are just praising Elon Musk. I don't know if there's something in the algorithm that every time somebody praises him, it becomes like the first thing I see.
Yeah, I think so, Ahmed, and I think this is not healthy, and it's not gonna continue. I don't think this is normal for somebody. And he keep. I know we're running out of time. He just tweeted, "I only have one passport, American passport, and I will fight and die."
Okay, we're out of time. WMNF Tampa.